Hayayam, hayayam, hayayayam, hayayam, hayayayam, hayayam, hayayayam, hayayayam.
Hello everyone, I'm happy to start a new series today, and something that has to do with the upcoming Yom Tov, but shouldn't have to do with Yom Tov. In other words, it's a mitzvah from the Torah probably, and yet we associate it with Yom Tov in certain places, and that is DUCHENing. Indeed, this is one of the most kept Ashkenazic customs in every Ashkenazic shul outside of Israel. The words of the Ramah ring in every one of those shuls. Nahagu b'chol medinot elu she'ein nosim kapayim ela b'Yom Tov. We only duchen on Yom Tov. And at the same time is one of the customs that really makes no halachic sense. The Torah is very clear in Parshat Naso that the Kohanim have to bless the Jewish people. It's very clear it's positive commandments, and yet we don't do it outside of Israel, except for 13 times a year on Yom Tov. Well, let's see why. Indeed, this is an ancient custom. The Agur, all the way back to the 15th century, asks, Nishal Gdol Hador Maharim Mulin, Lameina Kohanim Nosim Kapihin Bechol Yom Shehu Mitzvat Aseh. How come the Kohanim don't duchen every day? It's a positive commandment. And comes the Agur and says, I'll give you two reasons. Reason number one is because there was a minhag of Kohanim to go to mikveh before they duchen. It's difficult to go to mikveh every day, so they limited it to Yom Tov because there is a mitzvah that taheret atzmo baregel to go to mikveh erev Yom Tov. So they said on Yom Tov for sure they would go to mikveh. The Maharil actually repeats this in the name of one of the Gdolei Hador in his time. And indeed, he says people were either embarrassed to go to mikveh or it was hard to go to mikveh. The problem with this, says the Beis Yosef, is that this chumrah ati liyadei kula. It's a wonderful chumrah to go to mikveh before you duchen, but it brings out a huge kula, and that is you don't duchen every day. You do not fulfill 3 positive commandments from the Torah. Second reason the Agur brings is mishum bitul melacha. What does that mean? In the name of Maharim Mulin, he says, Mishum Bitul Melacha. Namely, that phrase, as explained by the Maharil, has to do with only having 3 aliyahs during the week and not adding aliyahs, even though maybe you would be allowed to. Why? Mishum Bitul Melacha. People have to go to work, and therefore we only add on Shabbos when people don't work. The Maharil says that even on Chol HaMoed Pesach, where you have long lanings, and you probably could divide it up into 7, 8 aliyahs, we don't do that. Why? Because of Bitul Melacha. So therefore, since Birkas Kohanim, in his words, could take 2 minutes without the singing, but still, Yivshar B'li Shehut Ksat, it's still a little bit, we don't do it except for on Yom Tov. I find that reason to be very problematic. According to him, doing a positive commandment, even for a minute and a half, is going to be such a tircha de tzibura that the Kolbel says, and I quote, "Ve'ena minhag atah la'asot nisiot kapayim ela b'shabbatot v'yamim tumim ve'efshar kim nimneu mishum Torah chatzim b'pnei Torah chatzibur." If we take that definition of tircha de tzibura, namely annoying the congregation with a long davening, then we can forget about a lot of parts of davening because everything is a tircha de tzibura. So we dafka take out a positive commandment? Zorat Hashatz is definitely derabanan, and we don't take it out, but this we take out. Reason number 3 is given by the Maharil, Mipnei Hagoyim. What does that mean? The Shut Zerah HaEmet, one of the Sephardic Gedolim, says in the name of the Zohar in Parshat Naso that if a Kohen blesses the people and they're Gokoyim in Shul, the bracha will not work. And since outside of Israel you can't ask non-Jews to leave Shul, we're going to do duchening. Therefore, they basically made a nice takana, don't duchen at all, maybe a non-Jew will come to shul. A reason that I find very shaky, simply because how many non-Jews come to shul? We're not going to duchen any day of the year because a goy might come in. And more than that, the 13 times a year you duchen, which is Yom Tov, which can come out on a weekday, maybe non-Jews will come in and say, hey, why are the Jews dressed up so nice? It's a Monday, it's a Tuesday, and they're in synagogue. So, the Ramami Pano, in Italy, he was in charge of actually printing the Shulchan Aruch, comes along and says this is a terrible minhag. He doesn't like it, but he says, you got to hear what people say. It says in the pasuk about Birkas Kohanim, Vayisa Aharon et yadav vayevarchem. Aaron put out his fingers and blessed the people. Vayerit me'asot hachatat va'olav ashlamim. After bringing the korbanot, comes along the Ramami Pano and says it was quoted in his time that people do not duchen except for the days in which you bring a korban chatat, because that's what it says in the pasuk. Vayerit me'asot hachatat va'olav ashlamim. Which day do you bring a korban chatat? We don't bring it every day, unless someone needs to. We don't bring it on Shabbos, only shnei kvasim b'nei shana temimim, which are ola. We only bring on Yom Tov, so therefore we only duchen on Yom Tov. Problem. We also bring a korban chatat on Rosh Chodesh, on Chol HaMoed Sukkos, Chol HaMoed Pesach. The common minhag is to only duchen on Yom Tov, not on Chol HaMoed and not on Rosh Chodesh. Comes along the Chasam Sofer and says, I'll give you the real McCoy reason. That pasuk that I just quoted connects duchening to the sacrificial work. We know in the sacrificial work, you need to have your mind set on the work. Pigul, namely having the wrong mindset, can actually posel the korban, make it invalidated. Well, nowadays, who has real kavanah in davening? We're on our phones all the time. So our davening is not worth it too much, and therefore, for sure, our Birkat Kohanim wouldn't work. We wouldn't have kavanah. You need kavanah in davening like you did for the korban, and all the more so for Birkas Kohanim. And therefore, he says, we limited it to 13 times a year with the hope that 13 times a year, the Kohanim will have kavanah. Wishful thinking, but it does make more sense than the other reasons we mentioned. Finally, maybe the most famous reason is the Ramah. The Ramah takes that Bitul Malacha issue, but takes it in a different way. People are very worried about their parnasa, and therefore they are not besimcha. And in order to do Birkas Kohanim, you need to be happy. So assumption number one, the Ramah says you need to be happy. You're not happy because you work too hard to make a parnasa. And even on Shabbos, he says, people are not disconnected from the week, but Yom Tov, especially a 2-day Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz, you're really disconnected, so then you're besimcha. And the Ramah says, when are you at the height of your simcha? At the end of shul, which is when shul's about to end at Musaf. And therefore, you only duchen on Yom Tov when you're besimcha, and only at Musaf. Very interesting reason. Problem, there's no source that says you have to be besimcha in order to duchen. And finally, the Pri Chadash says, I'll tell you why. Birkas Kohanim wouldn't work if someone's in the shul and is a nida. Well, the minhag is that since women come to shul even when they're nidas, so we can't do Birkas Kohanim. I don't understand that reason, simply because that would be on Yom Tov and after Yom Tov as well. So those are the 7 reasons why you don't duchen in Chutz La'aretz, and as I started out, none of them are very good. Having said that, those are the reasons that are given, and is the most commonly kept minhag. And the words of the Aruch HaShulchan, Ein shum tam nachon leminhagenu, levatel mitzvat aseh de birkas kohanim kol hashana kula, vekatfu de minhag haruhu. There is no good reason for this minhag. And yet, manaseh, he says, what am I going to do? V'keilu batko yatsa shelo laniach lanu lisa kapayim b'chol hashana kula. It's like a heavenly voice came out that said, do not duchen. And indeed, he brings stories of rabbis that tried to start duchening and something went wrong. Either the shul burnt down, they got arrested or whatnot, and it just didn't happen. So, the most well-kept minhag, really no good reason for it. Even though the Beis Yosef says, I applaud the people in Israel and in Egypt that duchen every single day, one of these reasons took over, and the Jewish people paskened, we don't duchen except for you. יאר השם פניו אליך ויחונקה יישא השם פניו אליך וישם לך